Good afternoon. Today is Thursday, April 23rd. My name is Jay Leask, and this is This Week in Teams.
Hey, I'm Craig Jenke. I am co-host with Jay, as you might have known if you saw one of our first 3 episodes. Sorry, I screwed that up again, but actually 2 episodes. This is the third one.
There we go.
And it's part of the On the Spot podcast network that we're trying to set up. We've been doing the podcast for a little while. We've transitioned now to these YouTube things since we're home alone and have nothing better to do. So we're chatting about teams and new things that are coming up in the Microsoft world. And hopefully you find it somewhat entertaining. And what else would they find it, Jay, besides entertaining? Intellectually stimulating?
I mean, thus far, they'd probably hang up on us, frankly.
Okay. That is fair. I actually saw we had more than 5 viewers last week. So I think it's actually going pretty good.
We doubled our viewership from 3 to 6 in 2 episodes.
There we go. That's incremental change. By this rate, we'll be up to over 1 million by the end of the month.
There we go. Well, maybe by the time the quarantine is over.
There you go. So Jay, Craig, what would you like to talk about today? I'll throw it to you. You can have the first topic.
All right. So the first thing on this week's hit list is the multi-window chat support. This has been driving me crazy since Teams first rolled out. I was a big proponent in Skype for Business of disconnecting all the chats. So whenever I started a new chat, it immediately opened up in a new window. I could minimize while still looking at the other ones. I don't know if you were familiar with it. The default view was everyone was one window. You selected the chat, you went to that chat, but you were still in that single window. Teams took that approach for the longest time. In the previews and tap programs we've had, we've seen the ability to pull a chat out, and I've got an article on here that says this is now rolling out across Office 365, at least commercially, right?
Yeah, so it's rolling out. I've seen it. I've used it. It is pretty sweet. I also believe on the roadmap is not just the chat, but the meetings will automatically start popping out. So you can have a meeting and put that on a different screen while still using Teams and doing the chats and the messaging your people and multitasking, which was exactly what everybody wants to do and is designed for, right? So I don't know if it's any more productive, but there's differing opinions on that.
Yeah, Teams is one of my biggest pet peeves with Teams has been the inability to multitask. If I open up a document within Teams and then I go to check out the latest chat from somebody, the document goes away. So the next time I open the document, if I was on 85 the first time, now I'm all the way at the beginning again. So it's nice that we're starting to get the ability to pop things out, to more easily open links in browsers, things like that. So this chat pop out will be really helpful in that process.
Yeah, especially since everybody's workaround it is to use the client, right? And then when I want to do other stuff, let's open a browser and log into Teams in the browser. So another addition of where people are finding workarounds to make things work. Similar to the background that you are now displaying, dropping a custom background into that hidden folder.
That's right. The next item on our list is I'm excited about this, but I haven't had a chance to play with it very much. And that is the integration of Yammer into Microsoft Teams as an app. They're calling it Communities, which is wholly appropriate with Teams being a focus on that inner circle. If you've never had that conversation with somebody, Microsoft considers there to be an inner circle of collaborators and an outer circle. That inner circle is the 5, 10, 20 people you work with on an almost daily basis. That's what Teams is designed for primarily. Communities are that outer circle. It's the corporate marketing. It is the team, the global group of people that do the same job you do that you don't have to interact with on a daily basis because they're in their region, you're in yours.
Yeah, so it becomes beneficial to me personally in like Microsoft, right? Because there's a lot of people, I specialize Teams, SharePoint, OneDrive, all that kind of stuff. And there's things that I'm interested in outside of that, Power Apps, Flow, and things like that. And occasionally I'll have questions and I can ask my team. And they may or may not know, but the nice thing is I can go to Yammer, and then if I throw it out there to Yammer, there's probably a guy either in China, a guy in India, or a guy in Europe who may know that answer, who I would otherwise not have the ability to even know that guy exists. I mean, when you're talking with a lot of people. So it is Yammer, if you don't use it, or is a great tool if if you're using it properly, is a great tool. But one of the things that I found with my coworkers that I've talked about is sometimes you forget it's there, because you're right, you don't have that daily need for it. So bringing it into Teams is huge.
Yeah, Microsoft has said from the beginning, Teams is the hub for collaboration. Bringing Yammer into Teams, making it easily accessible, calling it communities so it is clear what the focus is. Communities of practice are very common, especially in the government space, at least.
Right.
You know, there's a community of practice for people who do contracts. There's a community of practice for people who are SharePoint developers. And so it gives you that ability to know, hey, I need to go talk to this community and ask that technical question I don't have the answer to. Really cool kind of self-help way of growing your skill set and helping others.
Yeah. I'm kind of excited about it. I think it'll be pretty cool.
Yep. What's next, Craig?
What's next? I saw that Tom, and I'm not good at names, Arbonat has 4 features upcoming. So he posted a blog post, which we'll put in the show notes, so to speak, when we throw it up there. But part of it was a conversation on GDPR, and I believe how that has to affect when we're talking like video and being able to add callers in. Sometimes we have meetings that we might not want people to know who everybody is or what their phone numbers are and things like that.
Yep.
I can't remember what else he had, but that was the one that stuck out in my mind.
Yeah, so his article itself wasn't about GDPR, but I actually bumped into this. There's a Facebook community called Microsoft Teams, about 15,000 people in it last I looked. There's a question recently about someone who wanted to invite people to a meeting, but didn't want them to be able to get any personal information about each other. So, for example, when you send a meeting invite, you get everyone's email address. They wanted to avoid that. So everyone said use blind copy. Send the meeting information, but don't actually invite them to the meeting. That way, Outlook and Exchange aren't sending an invite. They're just getting that join link. And then Tom's post here talks about blocking the phone numbers so that you get, like, I think it's the first and last 2 digits of the phone number only, which is actually really nice. Generally, that's enough to be able to distinctly tell the difference between people without knowing who they are. And then there were a couple other things that were somewhat related, but you actually had a recommendation on this, right?
Yeah, so I also seen a very similar post to that somewhere else. It might have been in that Facebook group, because that is becoming huge. I mean, it's turning into more of a forum for asking questions. I don't necessarily know if that's what it was originally intended for, but and we've been seeing questions like that on Twitter and on Microsoft communities all over. And my understanding and what I've tested it out is when we're going to set up the meeting, instead of adding somebody as you get the choice to add them as required or optional, you also have a spot for resources, right? Normally that would be used to invite a conference room, so that the conference room is also in the meeting and we can hook them into the scheduling and we can hook the camera in and stuff like that. But if you add your person as a resource, they get basically blind copied on it and nobody knows that they're there. And I will have to test that out more, because I didn't see it when I was the testing that I did was to see if I could invite somebody without anybody else seeing it. So that resource didn't show up in the invitee list, right? So you don't see the schedule. So I can't go to see, hey, who are the attendees seeing it? It didn't get copied in the meeting invite that I sent. So I could go to the invite that I got, or you would have gotten if I would have included you in it and invited John Doe, right, as a resource. You don't see that John Doe is there and you don't see him in the attendees. What I did not try to do is actually then have the meeting to see what John Doe looks like when he enters. So
Gotcha.
That is the final part that I need to do. To see if you get that kind of information where you're talking about like the phone number that they're calling in from, or an email address or something like that.
All right. I think we can test that out over the weekend.
I think we're going to, and then we'll do a little video and let anybody know how that worked.
Awesome. Just also in that article, some really cool things. Microsoft is releasing in the future, a near future, hopefully, the default to lobby option for external users, for people who are not part of your tenant, who are not members of your organization, as well as people who are dialing in. You'll also often see that as PSTN users. And then an option to change who can present. Right now, everybody's a presenter, and they're setting an option to set defaults for who can be the presenter, which is going to be really helpful, I imagine, in the classroom space especially.
Yeah, a lot of things have been coming out of the classroom space that have really been pushed to the forefront. I was telling one of my clients yesterday actually about user voice, right, and how people
Hmm.
voting on things in the community has kind of driven what's been pushed out. We saw the raised hand feature come out really quickly once a lot of people were working from home, so that if you had something and weren't on camera, you could raise your hand, the teacher could see it, or whoever's presenting. A lot of comments that people wanted to see more than the standard 4. So
Right.
last time I saw they're going to roll out the 3x3 by the end of the month, so that should start rolling out pretty soon. It might be into early May, but it's starting to roll out across some of the tenants, is what I've heard. So that's coming. Yeah, so some features that are coming that have been driven by user voice, and more like a lot of stuff from the breakout rooms is also something that's on the roadmap, that I
Yeah,
saw user voice as being sooner rather than later. So
that's
and
cool.
we did a quick tip video on that, and threw it up on our YouTube channel. So just
Yeah,
a
if you haven't had a
not
chance,
breakout rooms, but a workaround for the breakout rooms.
yeah, if you haven't
And
had a chance, check out Craig's video in the Quick Tips channel of our YouTube, where he shows how they have done it in the past. There was another one in the roadmap that I wrote down for us to talk about. It's not Teams specific, but if you are recording your Teams meetings and you want to share them with people, in the roadmap for Q4 of this year, so October, November, December area, Microsoft is supposed to be releasing public anonymous external video sharing for Microsoft Stream. So why is that important? Yeah, the Teams meeting is recorded and streamed by default. It's really powerful. You've got all sorts of things, sharing permissions, the auto transcript built in, really cool stuff. And then the fact that you'll then have public and anonymous links that you can share those meetings out. For example, when I record a sales meeting, it'll be really helpful for me to be able to share that with the customer. If I'm doing a demo, for example, can't tell you how many times we've been asked to record the demo so they can share it with people who weren't able to attend.
now currently you have to download it and send it to them, or put it in
Yeah,
OneDrive and
there's
send a
there's
link.
tons of workarounds, but nothing native, and that'll be really nice.
Yeah, that's speaking of
And then
what you've been doing, I read a blog today about external access that I think that you wrote, which is the difference between external access, conditional access, and giving people access into SharePoint. If you want to talk about that for a second,
yeah,
it is a question I get asked almost daily by our clients: is what's the difference and how do we set that up?
yeah, it's funny. I started writing the blog, and if you do read it, there's a too long didn't read at the end, of course, just summarizing it. But I started writing the blog, and there are in Teams two ways to do sharing with people outside of your organization. There's external access and guest access. And most people assume external access means that they can access my team and my channels, and that's not true. The quick summary, I used some similes into pop culture. You may remember what was the show with Tim
Home
and
improvement.
Wilson? Home Improvement. Thank you. So you may remember Home Improvement. Wilson was the neighbor next door, and you always only saw him from the tip of the nose up. That's your external access. It's someone who's outside of your tenant, but they can kind of like talk to you a little bit over the fence, so to speak. Guest access being the ability to actually let someone into your home. I compared that to friends and how those six friends had keys to their apartments and were constantly in and out of each other's homes, looking at everything they had. That's a guest at a high level. Of course, there's permissions and capabilities around that. And then but it's funny when I was writing it, I had to include. There's a third way, and it's kind of a bit of a warning in that if you don't know about it, you may not know stuff's being shared. And what it is in SharePoint, there is a way of sharing documents with people outside the organization. It's controlled by SharePoint. It's completely separate from groups, which is the hub of permissions within Teams. It's what connects permissions in Teams with permissions in SharePoint. This external sharing capability in SharePoint is not connected to that. So a power user in SharePoint who's an owner of a group or owner of a team can turn external sharing on if it's on at the tenant level, and then start sharing content. And the problem with that is there's nothing in Teams to say that's happening.
Right.
So people in Teams may think this is completely internal. I can share confidential information, but then in SharePoint, someone may have turned this feature on to share content out. So you guys just got to be careful and be aware. It's not so much a fear mongering thing. It's as a planning thing. If
Right.
you're giving people ownership privileges, you need to know what they have access to do. And you need to communicate with them. Hey, if you do this, this is what could happen. So
So
thank you. I
that is
appreciate you
an
bringing that
actually
up.
interesting one because I do a lot of governance talks and I talk about monitoring in my clients and turning on alerts in the security and compliance thing, where we talk about files being shared externally. So it's one of the things that I recommend that they might want to turn on and get at least a summary of that. So then when people are doing your backdoor sharing, somebody will at least be alerted.
Right, right. Yeah, no, that's good. That's good. So, Craig, first of all, thank you for bringing that up. I really wasn't going to, so I do appreciate that. But second of all, I guess to wrap up, you had a quick tip you wanted to share today. We'll call it the tip of the week, but I'm not going to promise we're giving one every week.
We already given a couple of nice ones. So one of the things that people want to do or have always wanted to do is share their screen, share their teams. And back in the Skype days, you may have wanted to share, and I'll share my screen now. And you may see Jay because it took this picture. But normally, if I were going to share a video, I had to turn on my speakers really loud and put it next to the microphone, right, so people could hear it or they wouldn't get it. The nice, cool new feature when you go to share, which is this button, normally, right, there's now a button here that you have to check. So I'm doing this, I have to share because I won't get this option after I share, to include my system audio. So now I can
That's
include my
great.
system audio, and once I share this, then if I play a video or MP3 or something like that, that will also get picked up as if it was in my microphone, and you'll be able to hear it.
That's fantastic. I definitely want to see that in a quick tip on our YouTube channel. So thank you for pointing that out today.
Cool.
All
And
right, you want to wrap us up?
I think that's all I got for today. Doing it a day early. Normally we do this on a Friday, so nice talking to everybody. Thanks for having a good conversation with me, Jay. All of a sudden, I became big in the screen. I don't know where Jay went in his video. So,
Oh,
Jay, where'd you go?
I hit the wrong button on my screen and I hung
My
up.
face got big, and I have I have a too high density video camera. I don't know what happened with it, but there we go. That's a wrap. Catch you next week on This Week in Teams.